In Odessa, Texas, we had bad news again. A gunman went on a rampage, and we all looked at each other, at least we did in my circle, and I imagine it's the same. All of us thought, this has got to end. What is happening to us? Well, celebrities know exactly what's happening to us. Bette Midler said this: the NRA. For years, gun dollars have paved their way. Lobbyists always buy them something. So it is now the NRA's fault, according to Bette Midler. Then Rob Reiner said, guns don't kill people. Politicians in bed with the NRA kill people. Then Kacey Musgraves says, I love you, Texas. I can't believe we're all being forced to live in a constant state of fear. Second mass shooting in my home state in a month makes me sick. When will we live in a world where human lives mean more than money? Meaning the NRA is taking money and they're bribing politicians to keep the Second Amendment intact. Josh Gad just says another week, another gun massacre. Another week, another gun massacre. Alyssa Milano says, happy Friday, everyone. Oh, I'm sorry, this is Chelsea Handler. Happy Friday, everyone. And Republicans, how about no white supremacists with guns after Labor Day? Stephen King, when are the bench warmers in Washington going to do something about the river of blood produced by gun violence? Change the laws or change the ones who make the laws. George Takei said, when will the Senate act on gun control? How many more mass shootings will we see before we come to our senses? And Mia Farrow says, we have a crisis here. When will someone do something? So I don't know what you got out of that, but let's maybe go to our politicians. Our politicians say they have the solution. The former HUD secretary, now running for president, Julian Castro, he said that he wanted to expand background checks for those who sell more than 5 guns in a year. So now I don't know if he knows this. You have to be a licensed dealer, and you go through background checks to become a licensed dealer. But he wants to expand that. So maybe we have fewer people selling guns. Beto says that he is going to push for mandatory gun buyback legislation. He says we're going to speak as strongly and as defiantly as we can, but we're also going to take action. Universal background checks, red flag laws, ending the sales of weapons of war, and buying those AK-47s and AR-15s back so they can't be used against our fellow Americans. He's going to buy the weapons of war back. Now that we've heard all the solutions, now that we've heard who's to blame, let's have a real conversation, can we? Let's start first with what happened. The police chief in Odessa said both the shooter and his company rang 911 after he was fired, but he left before police arrived. He was a truck driver. He lost his job. But that's not why he went on the rampage. FBI agent told the press it didn't happen because he was fired. He showed up to work enraged. 7 people were killed, at least 22 injured in the attack. Authorities have named the suspect attacker. We're not going to give you his name, but he was 36-year-old man. He worked at the Journey Oil Field Services. We haven't found any links to domestic terrorism or international terrorism. Do you remember when we hoped and prayed when something went wrong that it wasn't an American? That we wanted to believe that Americans just couldn't do this? He got into his car after he was fired Police pulled him over as he failed to signal for a turn. He then shot the officers, and then he drove to Odessa. He shot at random. He targeted motorists. He targeted passersby. He was killed in front of a movie theater. But 22 people were wounded, including a 17-month-old girl, Anderson Davis. A family friend said she had a hole in her bottom lip, a hole in her tongue, and her top and bottom teeth were all knocked out. Now, that's a pretty compelling story, but let me give you the last two paragraphs. The suspect had previously failed a gun purchase background check in Texas. We must keep guns out of the hands of criminals, said the governor of Texas. Now, that's a pretty compelling story. And if you're anything like me, you were impacted by this story. I was with family and friends, and we were all together. And somebody came to the house and said, there's been another shooting. The entire room, everybody in the room went, oh, geez, where? Can we do one thing today? Can we just stop assuming that everyone within the sound of your voice, my voice, that there is half of the country that wants the other half dead? Can we stop assuming that because you believe in the Second Amendment, you don't care about children, you don't care about families, you don't care about what happened? I was with a good friend, and I saw the way he reacted. It stayed with him for a long time. And throughout the day, he said, just in the middle of conversation, talking about something else, he would say, all those people that got up this morning, they were going to a family picnic or they had plans, and now nothing. All those people that got up and had a son or a daughter, and now they're dead. Now see, if I told you he was against guns, he would be okay. But his response was, I am going home and I am going to get trained and carry a gun because I am not going to let this happen around me. Now, if I tell you this, half of the country hates him and says he has no heart. We all abhor the violence, all of us. But just like that story, the headlines are all wrong. That story was not a story that was printed in the first hour or the first day. That story came from the next day. There are stories today talking about 22 injured and dead. That's not the headline today. The headline is in the story, but it happened to be the last two sentences. The gunman failed the background check in Texas. So how did he get the gun? Was he a racist? He had a long history of mental illness, and he failed the background check and was not allowed to buy a gun. He didn't buy this gun legally. He didn't buy it in a store because he failed the background check. So who sold him the gun? And That should be our discussion today. Who sold him the gun? How did he get this gun? That's what we should be looking for today. We should also be having a conversation about mental health. But even that is dicey. Because we have a preacher now that says if you vote for Donald Trump, that's a sign of mental illness. We have people in Hollywood saying that if you believe in the Second Amendment, you have some sort of mental illness. Mental illness is always politicized. When a country goes insane, the first people to jump on board are the psychiatrists. And they'll tell you who's sane and who should be locked up. It happened in Germany. It happened with Stalin. It happens in China. You use the medical terminology and the medical personnel, and they're always more than eager to tell you who should be locked up. But we're not having those conversations today. We're talking about banning assault rifles. We're talking about banning semi-automatics. We're talking about confiscating guns. Joe Biden even said we should ban all magazines. It's insanity that we haven't already banned all magazines that hold more than one bullet. Well, that would be a musket, Joe. We're talking about red flags and background checks. He failed his background check. The law this time worked. Well, he was fired. He was a trucker. Well, we could go down that rabbit hole. How many truckers are going to lose their jobs in the next few years? If that's the problem, we have real issues headed our way. How long did it take you before you heard, and perhaps this is the first time you've heard it, that he was struggling with the suicide of his sister? Have you seen the place he lived? All the broken windows. It was like an old factory or granary. Can we just spend a few minutes just talking about the real issue here, like adults, and not assume that either side is bad, but we're just all Americans struggling with something that we've never struggled with before.